Catch Me If You Can. Look, everybody's seen the movie. I've gotten a ton of requests from guys in the comment section saying that you've got to do Catch Me If You Can, you've got to do Catch Me If You Can. So I actually watched the movie again before I did the review to clip the different scenes. But I know the movie by heart. I've watched this movie 50 times at least. So, and I also read the book. When I was in prison, I read the book probably 3 times. I even read the second book that Frank Abagnale wrote, which was called Art of the Steal, where he explains how he got out of prison and what happened when he was on probation and starting this secured document company, the whole thing. So basically, Catch Me If You Can, the great thing about the movie is he's just a young kid. He's a young kid who basically the catalyst for his crimes is that his parents, they end up getting divorced. He's from a troubled home. His father's kind of a manipulative guy. In the book, they get a little bit more into it. But basically, his father has problems with the IRS. He's kind of shifty. What I like about the movie is that it basically starts off with this guy's real life, just how he's just kind of a creative individual. You know, the catalyst that causes him to go on to start committing crimes. And the thing is that most people want to believe that, like, you're a criminal, you were born a criminal, you just started doing bad things, you're just a bad person. But a lot of times there's something that sparked it or caused your criminality, your propensity to commit crime, where other people going through the same type of thing go a different path. They obviously typically do the right thing. And for some reason, or maybe they escape into drugs, some people rebel against that and society in general, and they're antisocial and they start committing crimes. In the movie, it's great because they give him an out. They really build a great sympathetic character for Frank because of his divorce. And I'll go ahead and play the clip now.
Everything in this country has to be legal. So what we need to do is make some decisions. That's what Mr. Kuzna is here for.
So he essentially just comes home one day, and his parents are getting a divorce. He had no idea. He kind of has an idea because he caught his mother with another man.
A divorce.
This is important because it states who you are going to live with after the divorce, whose custody he will be in.
He's just a kid. He's 15, 16 years old.
You can take as long as you want, but when you come back into this room,
and
I want to see a name.
They tell him you got to pick. Spur of the moment, boom, come home, lawyer is there, the parents are there, you got to pick which one of us you want to live with. I mean, he gets terrified and he's scared and he takes off and he runs away from home. That's kind of sparks the situation. He takes off, he ends up getting into, he moves into several motels. He actually stays at a few friends' houses. If you read the book, he stays at some friends' houses. He moves into a couple of these flop motels. He starts trying to get different jobs. He slowly starts realizing the issue is his age. He's so young, nobody wants to pay him any money. And he can't survive on the money that he's making. And he gets a few jobs. It's just they don't pay his bills. They can't even pay the rent. And so he slowly starts to, first he overdraws his account, his bank account. Then he starts to slowly notice certain things that are happening around him. And he starts to try and do write bad checks. And the evolution of that scam slowly takes place over the course of the movie, the beginning part of the movie, and this is one of the clips that kind of goes over that. And it's interesting if you watch the movie. You got to watch the movie. If you've never seen the movie, that's insane. First thing he does is change his age. Of course, he changes his name. He starts to try and...
Well, you see, it's my grandmother's birthday next week, and I want to get her something extra special. Please, it's my midterm next week, and my books are stolen.
I'm sorry, but we are not allowed to take checks from people we don't know.
So initially he starts forging checks and going to different banks and trying to cash them. Of course, they won't cash those checks. So what happens is, I mean, it's like most scams. Okay, it's my own personal different variations of my scams that I ran. You know, it's an evolution. You start to notice little things, a little here, a little there. You tweak this, you tweak that. You get caught once or twice and you get out of it. But every single time you start learning a little here, a little there. And so your scam starts to evolve and evolve. And then once you find the correct pattern that works, that actually pays off, you ramp up production. You McDonald'ize it. If it worked once, now it's just a matter of adding zeros to it. So, and that's what he does. And this is the clip that shows his basic evolution, how he kind of comes across it and figures it out. I mean, nobody's cashing his checks. So he eventually sees a pilot, and the pilot, everybody's opening the door for the pilot. They respect the pilot. And he realizes, by following the pilot, he realizes that this pilot is getting respect, and he's getting, he's garnering trust that Frank, as a kid, or even with a fake ID in his 20s, he can't pull off. Nobody's buying it. So he actually goes out and he gets a Pan Am pilot's uniform. So he gets a pilot's uniform. I think it's co-pilot. He gets like a co-pilot's uniform, and he goes in and tries to cash a check. Hey, this is Matt Cox. I hope you're enjoying the video. Wanted to let you guys know real quick that one of the ways I pay my bills is I do paintings. My paintings range anywhere from $800 to a couple thousand, but I also have smaller paintings that I sell for $295, and that includes shipping. And I've got Marilyn Monroe, Bubblegum Girl, Biggie Smalls. I've even got some Trumps. I'm gonna leave my information in the description box, and enjoy the rest of the video. Just to see what happens. And here is the clip.
I was also wondering if I could write you a personal check.
For airline personnel, we cash personal checks up to $100. Payroll checks, we cash up to $300.
Dear Dad, I've decided to become a pilot for Pan American Airways, the most trusted name in the skies.
So he makes what he thinks is a Pan Am check, or what appears to be a Pan Am check. In the book, he actually gets a hold of a check, a Pan Am check.
Fine, thank you.
He makes like a copy of one, so he knows what it looks like. Hands her the...
How would you like it?
She cashes the check. He turns it into an assembly line. Look at all these fucking checks. Massive amounts of checks. First he starts hitting all of the hotels. And what happens is in the book is you realize that he ends up going to cash a check, and one of the hotel clerks says, well, we don't have enough money to cash that check. But you know, the airline will cash it for you. And he's like, ooh, really? And they're like, yeah, sure. I mean, you know, if you're going to be at the airport tomorrow, bring it there. So he goes in and he goes up to, with his Pan Am check, goes up to Pan Am. I think it's Pan Am. He goes right up to Pan Am, and boom, they cash the check. So then he decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to keep fucking with these hotels. I'm just going to start flying around the country. He figures out how to deadhead, which is where you sit in something called the jump seat, which is like right behind the pilot, and it's up in the cockpit. And so you get these free rides all over the country just by showing up and saying, hey, I'm deadheading to LA, I'm deadheading to New York, I'm deadheading here. So he starts flying around the country, cashing checks at different airports. Never flies Pan Am though, because his fear is Pan Am pilots would know too much about Pan Am, and he doesn't know much about them at all. So he doesn't know anything about planes. He's flying around the fucking country in the cockpit of planes, talking to other pilots and co-pilots about planes and airports, and he has no clue. So he has to start studying. And that's the whole thing, is that what I like about the movie is that he takes his scam serious. Like, he studies consistently. He's constantly asking questions. He really gets into it. He could have a conversation with a pilot and completely fool that guy into thinking that he knows exactly what he's talking about, and that he's a pilot or a co-pilot, whatever. There's both pilots. Anyway, so So the next clip is when essentially the FBI get a hold of him. They get onto the whole scam, and they end up start tracking him. And the way they do that is they explain it better in the book. They go over it a little bit in the movie, but he ends up coming up with a scam that they call the float. And you have several. What happens is checks go through routing, different routing or hubs. Well, on your routing number of a check, there's a couple of the numbers actually determine which Federal Reserve bank it will go through. So what he starts doing is he realizes this, and he changes the number. He gets a hold of an actual embossing machine that can make checks, create routing numbers. He starts changing the numbers. So what happens is, if he cashes a check in Florida, they should be rerouted to the closest Federal Reserve bank for processing. Instead, he sends it across the country. So it takes 4 or 5 days to get across the country, go through their router. They determine that this bank isn't registered here. They then send it back to the correct bank, or the correct Federal Reserve bank. That bank processes the check. And instead of knowing that your check is bad in 2 or 3 days, it takes up to 2 weeks to figure it out. So he can stay in one area, and they call them paper hangers. And basically he can put bad paper all over the place and get a ton of money and stay there, hang out for 2 weeks before anybody even knows it. What ends up happening in this scene is that the FBI, and they call that check, it's known as floating a check. So it ends up that Hanready is the name of the FBI agent. He ends up figuring the whole thing out, and he shows up to actually collect a check, one of the bad checks, and it just so happens that the clerk at the hotel says that the guy's still here. He's up in his room right now. And so Hanready goes up there and tries to arrest him. And this is the scene right here.
FBI! Drop it! Relax. You're late, all right? My name's Alan, Barry Allen, United States Secret Service. Your boy just tried to jump out the window. My partner has him in custody.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You think the FBI are the only ones on this guy? I mean, come
See
on.
some credentials.
This is great.
Sure.
He's not a Secret Service agent. He hands him his wallet.
I didn't expect the Secret Service on this.
Don't worry about it. Well, what's your name?
Hanready.
But Hanready can't open the wallet. It's got a clip on it.
Mind if I see some identification? Sure. You never can be too careful these days. Well, tough luck, Carl.
Mind if I come downstairs with you? I gotta take a look at this.
This is great.
Sure thing. Just do me a favor and sit tight for a second while I get this evidence downstairs. You know, I don't want to...
Has a conversation with them, complete 100% confidence, completely fools the FBI agent into believing that he's a Secret Service agent. Lets him take the fucking Micker ink machine and leave with it. So I guess one of the reasons I find that scene so interesting or so comical is I remember seeing it in the movie and being like, man, they had to embellish that. Like, who would possibly be able to pull that off? And this guy doesn't check, he doesn't open the wallet, he doesn't anything. Well, when you actually read the book, what you end up finding out is they actually they combine 2 different scenes for that scene. But, you know, it's Hollywood and you have to do that. They don't have 10 or 20 hours to completely document a book. So they end up combining it, but it's still it's a great scene. And what's great about it in my particular case is that I've actually been in a bank, and I think I borrowed $1.3 million on some house or 2 different houses, and I had it in the bank, and I was removing money from about 6 or 7 different bank accounts. I was removing $5,000, $9,000 every day, every other day from all of the accounts. So I'm draining these accounts. And I end up getting out $6,000 or $7,000 that day, and I get arrested. Sheriff shows up, he arrests me, they pull me aside, and at that moment, I was #1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list. They grab me, they handcuff me, they bring me into the office of the bank manager's office. the investigator comes and he walks in, and he starts questioning me as a guy named Gary Sullivan. They thought I was Gary Sullivan. They didn't realize I was Matt Cox. They didn't know I was on the Secret Service's most wanted list. And what was so interesting about this, what I like about this, is that when they ask me for my driver's license, or for my ID, well, first they pat me down. So the guy pats me down, the sheriff. They pull out my wallet. And when the sheriff says, "Where's your ID?" I say, the other guy, or the other sheriff has it. The other deputy's got it. Because when I was at the counter, I had my Gary Sullivan ID on the counter. So when they handcuff me, he takes the ID. So he takes the ID. So I go, he's got it. So he's holding my wallet. Inside of my wallet, if he had just opened the wallet, inside my wallet, I had a driver's license for a guy named Michael Eckert. With my picture. Not South Carolina. It was a North Carolina driver's license. The name Michael Eckert, issued by North Carolina DMV. So he's got a South Carolina ID that has Gary Sullivan, and I've got another ID in another state as another person. Both have my pictures on it. Both issued by the DMV. I'm done. I'm done. You know what the cop does? He looks at it, and he looks at the other guy. The other guy holds up the license, and he goes, "Oh, okay." He said, "No big deal," and puts the fucking wallet back in my pocket. He never opens it. I don't know why he didn't open it. I don't know why he didn't search it. I don't know. I mean, just fucking dumb luck. I mean, really, the whole time they were holding me, and the whole time I was talking to the agent, or sorry, the investigator, I was thinking, any minute now they're going to figure this out. But the whole time I'm acting 100% completely confident. Absolutely. What are you talking about? I own this house. I applied for a loan. What do you mean? The head of Wachovia's fraud department was on the phone screaming, "Arrest this guy. It's a fake ID. He's borrowed 5 or 6 more." Or he thought I borrowed 3 mortgages. I'd actually borrowed 6 mortgages on that house. He's like, he's got 3 mortgages on the house. He's removing the money. He's running a shotgunning scam. Just going on and on and on about how it's a fraud. I completely convinced the investigator that I haven't done anything wrong. There is a problem at the bank, that if anybody's committed a crime, it's the bank loan officers, and that you need to be investigating them. And this guy is 100% off base. And my name's Gary Sullivan, and I work at a labor company, and I pull out my business card, and I give him the business card, and I go, "Look, I wouldn't know how to do this if I tried." By the time the Wachovia guy starts screaming to the investigator, by the time he starts screaming at this guy, his ID is fake. He's already completely bought into my bullshit. So that was really the nail in the coffin, because he goes, "Look at his ID. His ID is fake." But he'd already run my ID, and he knew that my ID was real. I'd had it issued by the South Carolina DMV. So now he's saying, this is fake, it's fraud, and the investigator already knows it's not fraud. So when he says that, he's like, "Oh yeah, this guy's way off," because he knows that that's me, or he thinks it's me. In fact, the head of the fraud department for Wachovia Bank actually was 100% right and had everything correct, and really was just, this poor bastard, he was just miserable when they let me go. So, and I always wondered to myself, and I wondered always what happened with the investigator. And actually, when I was being interviewed by the Secret Service, I think it was the FBI. When I was being interviewed by the FBI, I asked them. I said, "Hey, whatever happened with that guy, with that detective? Did he get in trouble?" And they were like, "Nah, I didn't get in trouble, but he was embarrassed." They were like, he was embarrassed because, like, 1, my wanted poster was on the wall. 2, they'd all received notifications. So he'd actually seen the notification about me, and within days actually had me in handcuffs. And so the FBI agent was like, he was just embarrassed. Nothing happened to him, but he was just embarrassed. He was embarrassed that you got over on him, and no big deal. But so that scene, when I watched that scene, it just, as horrible as it is, it rings extremely true, and it's comical to me for all the wrong reasons. in the book, he doesn't contact the FBI. He never calls the agent. So in my case, I actually at one point I'd come very close to being caught, and I was just, you know, I was at rock bottom. I was low on funds. The chick that I was running these scams with, she and I had split up, and she'd wiped me out as far as money is concerned. I just like was doing anything to just get away from her. So I just like take everything. I think I ended up with like $100,000, and I had left, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's really, if you're on the run and don't have a job and you're going from town to town and rebuying everything, that's not a lot of money. So, which is horrible to say. Anyway, the point is that I'm leaving, and when I was leaving, I called home and I talked to one of my former mortgage brokers, and she was telling me, look, the FBI has been talking to everybody. Why don't you contact them and see if you can negotiate some kind of a self-surrender or something? Maybe they'll work a deal with you. So I end up calling the FBI agent. And so I called the FBI agent, and I spoke with her on the phone 2 or 3 times over the course of that day. And I was calling to discuss, hey, what if I turn myself in? How much time will I get? And so she and I went back and forth about that. And it turns out they were actually tracking those phone calls and had sent FBI agents out of Baton Rouge to actually come and grab me from where I had purchased the phone. Because I kept shutting it off, they weren't able to track it. I don't know what the technology is like now. This was over a decade ago. So, but they tracked it back to where I was at that moment and where I bought the phone. So they were driving there while I'm talking to her on the phone, sitting in a subway. So anyway, the point is, eventually they actually end up missing me. This scene is very interesting because what happens is he starts calling the FBI agent. You know, the truth is he doesn't have anybody to call. So on holidays and stuff, he basically calls the FBI agent because he's the only constant in this guy's life. And if you're going to run a scam like this, you can never really trust anybody. The kind of people that you hang out with that are going to be okay with what you're doing are other criminals. Other criminals tend to get busted, and when they get busted, they tend to cooperate and they turn you in. And that's just what happens. So he ends up being able to maintain his scam for so long because he trusts nobody. And that's why, and he's constantly traveling. So he's able to go for years. So this is the clip. It's pretty good.
Mrs. Hanratty, Merry Christmas.
Hello, Carl.
Hello.
I love this.
Let's talk face to face.
All right. I'm at my suite at the Stuyvesant Arms, room 3113.
You think you're gonna get me again? You're not going to Vegas. You're not in the Stuyvesant Arms. You'd love for me to send out 20 agents Christmas Eve to barge into your hotel, knock down the door so you can make fools out of us all.
I'm really sorry if I made a fool out of you.
You're gonna get caught. One way or another. It's a mathematical fact. It's like Vegas. The house always wins.
So one of the things that happened when I was talking to the FBI agent was she kept telling me, eventually when she realized we weren't getting anywhere in our negotiations, she started saying, listen, we're going to catch you. Eventually, we're going to get you. You're going to screw up. I remember she said, you're going to go back home. Someone's going to recognize you. You're going to get pulled over and get a ticket. You're going to get some law enforcement agent's going to recognize you and grab you. Someone's going to turn you in. And eventually it's going to end and we will grab you. And I remember I said, I was like, first of all, I've been pulled over by the police. I got pulled over. I'll tell you right now, I must have been pulled over a dozen times, gotten a dozen different tickets. I even went to traffic school as another individual because I was going to lose his license. I'd gotten so many tickets in his name, I was going to lose his license. And I had a car that was in his name. I had an apartment in his name. I had credit cards and I had everything in his name. I can't lose this guy's license. So I actually went to traffic school. So I had a dozen passports. I'd been in and out of the country 2 or 3 times by this point. So I remember saying to her, Nobody's going to recognize me. I get tickets all the time. I've been in and out of the country 3 or 4 times. I said, and I'm never going back to Tampa. There's nothing left in Tampa to go back to. So nobody's ever going to recognize me. If you ever want to have this conversation in person, you need to get me a deal. And we went back and forth. But I remember when I hung up the phone with her, I was so just beaten down by her. Because this is an FBI agent who's saying, look, you're going to get caught. And, you know, and she had experience. She even threw several people out there that she knew that had run and they all got caught. And she's like, and they were fucking super smart. And they knew what they were doing. And they this and they that. And I was like, fuck. So, I mean, I could totally see this guy flipping out and being like, just slamming the phone down because, you know, they're coming for you. So, you know, in my own case, I didn't turn myself in, and I kept going until they actually caught up with me because, you know, I'm arrogant, and I just thought I was going to be able to keep getting over on him, and that didn't happen. What happens at this point in the movie, or really in Frank Abagnale's crime spree, is he realizes that the FBI they're on him. They've come close a couple of times. He's in the book. He's come close several times. And what he does is he takes his scam on the road. He actually goes to Europe, and he realizes, but he doesn't really know much about Europe, and he doesn't know much about how the banking system works, or how their IDs work. Is he going to be able to counterfeit an ID? Is he going to be able to obtain one legally? He doesn't know. So he realizes he needs some accomplices to help him, and what he ends up doing is he goes to a female college and initiates a program where they're going to hire stewardesses a year before they graduate college. So he interviews a bunch of stewardesses or future flight attendants. Sorry, my bad. So he interviews a bunch of future flight attendants, and he says, what we're going to do is we're going to hire you as flight attendants. You're going to be paid, and we're going to take you for the summer to Europe, and we're going to do basically a photo shoot throughout Europe. And they're like super excited about this. So he gets like 8 to 10 of them, and he takes them to Europe. When he gets to Europe, now he gets them flight attendants' outfits. He hires photographers to take professional photographs of them all over Europe. Goes through France, goes through Norway, Belgium. I mean, he's all over the place. Does it for 3 months. And what he does with these women is he gives them checks. And he says, these are your checks from Pan America. And here is your expense voucher. Now, what Pan America wants you to do is cash these checks and give me the money for the expense vouchers, or for the expenses, and you keep your check. He does this for 3 months. I think it's about 3 months with these women, and they cash, I don't know what it is, $100,000 worth of checks. They don't realize they're getting their $250 check, and they're cashing a $700 or $800 a week check times 10 women, and they're going around throughout Europe taking photographs, and he's having all these photographers bill Pan Am, so he doesn't pay for that. He's sticking the hotels with bad checks. He basically just tears through Europe with these Pan Am checks. And these girls are unwitting accomplices, and they're giving him a chunk of money every single week. So I forget exactly how much money he ends up taking, $100,000, $200,000 in 3 months. He's got all these little ways where he's got these girls cashing checks for him, and they have no clue. They're naive college students who are excited that they are now going to work for Pan Am. This is back in the 60s and 70s. So ultimately, they come back, and he ends up going back to Europe, and he ends up getting caught in Europe. But this is the clip that they show in the movie where it kind of semi explains how he gets these these college students to kind of help get him out of the country. And actually in the book, it goes way into more or less what this scene is really supposed to be. This is the clip. He goes to university, he sets up a program, he's got letters from Pan Am, and he completely fools the university into helping him perpetrate this fraud. He gets the girls walk him through the airport. In the movie, they make it seem like they're just a diversion. In the book, you understand why he really ends up with these girls. He takes them all to Europe, they run their scam.
Exactly.
What ends up happening is this. He goes to Europe. What happens? In the movie, they trim it down. Obviously, they don't have the ability to go into the intricacies of what actually happens. So he ends up going back to Europe. He's running his check scam. Really accelerates the fraud. So he's got a ton of money. He ends up renting a house, hangs out. He basically starts just living off of his money, the money that he's got. Although I think he's still I think he's still doing scams. But he ends up getting caught. It's not the FBI agent that comes in. It's the locals end up catching him. What happened was a woman, a stewardess that he had either dated or dated a friend of hers, recognizes him as being this fake pilot that they're looking for. She's in Europe. She sees him in this little French town, and she recognizes him. She goes to the police come and they arrest him. Boom, that's it. He's arrested. That's it. That's how he gets caught. You know, it's not nearly as dramatic as it is in the film, although it's a great scene in the film. So he ends up getting incarcerated. He ends up doing time in France, Spain, I want to say it's Norway or Belgium. He does a couple years, like a year here, 6 months here. And what ends up happening is, I want to say maybe it's Belgium. I could have the country wrong. But he does like a year there, and he ends up working in a parachute factory making parachutes. And he gets to take college courses because their prison systems, the way a lot of European countries at that time, and really a lot of them still to this day, they feel like if you're committing crimes, it's because we as a society have failed you. And it's our job to put you into an environment where you can succeed. So they don't throw you into a prison and lock you down like some European countries do, but a more liberal country like Belgium or Norway, they basically say, look, you can take free classes. You have to stay here. You have to kind of stay away from your family. They get to come in and see you. You get to buy this. You get to buy this. You can work at this factory. You can do this. You get regular wages. You can take free classes. They basically try and reintegrate you back into society. So I don't know if that works or not. Their crime rate is much lower than ours. So what ends up happening is, in Belgium, in Belgium, he's about to leave and go back to not the United States, but he's going to have to end up going either to France. No, he's going to have to go to Spain, and he's petitioning not to send him back to Spain because he's facing several years in Spain, and there's probably no way he's going to survive being in prison in Spain. It's horrible. It's worse than the French prison that he was in. By the way, he ends up getting double pneumonia and almost dies in the French prison after just 6 months, because they basically lock you in a fucking box. So, not one of the more liberal prison systems, penal systems. So, and the guys that have been in the French prisons have already told him, Spain's worse. You'll never survive Spain. They give out almost no time, because why would we give out more than 5 years? You'll be dead in 2. Nobody's going to survive 5. You could murder someone and get 5 years because it's basically a death sentence. Back then, this is in the 60s and 70s. So what happens is, a judge in Belgium, I'm pretty sure, I wish I had read the book before I did this, but a judge in Belgium actually takes pity on him and says, I'm revoking your passport and I'm putting you on a plane back to the United States. So that they fly him back to the United States before the Spanish U.S. Marshals, basically, or Marshals, come and get him and bring him back. Before the Spanish police show up and bring him to Spain for extradition, they put him on a plane and fly him back to the United States. So he gets lucky in that respect. Once he's locked up, he then ends up becoming friends with this FBI agent. And the FBI agent starts to come to see him. So I'm going to show you the clip, and then I'll tell you what really happened. So here is the clip from the movie after he's been arrested and taken back to the United States and sentenced.
What's in the briefcase?
I'm on my way to the airport. It's a paper hanger who's working his way through Minnesota.
So they kind of have a friendship.
Got any of
He
the
shows
checks?
him, he ends up showing him one of the checks on a case he's working on. Just because he's interested, they have a common interest.
See, he's just using a stencil machine and an Underwood.
To teller at the bank.
Say again?
It's definitely a teller, Carl.
It's comical
Take a look at something.
how many FBI
Tell me what you
agents,
think.
Secret Service agents, DEA agents I've talked to,
That's a fake.
and how much you have in common with them
There's no perfect
as a criminal.
edge, right? I mean, this check was hand cut, not fed.
The only difference is
Paper's double bonded, much too heavy to be a bank check.
they, they've never
Magnetic
actually
ink
done the
is,
things that they're
raised
investigating,
against
so
my
they never
fingers instead of
really
flat.
have the insight.
We have the power to take you out of prison. You'd be placed in the custody of the FBI, where you'd serve out the remainder of your sentence as an employee of the federal government.
Hi,
I love this story.
I'm Frank Abagnale. I'm supposed to start work here today.
In the movie, it's great, right? Like the FBI gets him out of prison. In reality, Frank Abagnale, I want to say he got 12 years, and I could be wrong. It might be 14. I want to say it's about 12. They had back then the federal system had had parole. They don't have parole anymore. They have something called supervised release, where basically you do 87% of your time, and then you're released on supervised release. So in my case, even after I've done 12 and a half years and I get released, I still have 5 years of supervised release, which is essentially federal probation, where anytime they can throw you back in prison if you commit another crime or something along those lines, or any type of infraction. In Abagnale's case, he actually goes up for parole and he gets turned down. I think he gets turned down twice, and then after serving like 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 years, he then gets released on parole. He then ends up, he gets fired from several jobs, which is funny, because his probation officer keeps showing up. He doesn't want to tell these people he's on parole, and then his parole officer would show up, or probation officer shows up and tells them, hey, this guy's on parole, and they go, what? And they fire him. He ends up doing some kind of pro bono work for the sheriff's office. His probation officer comes in and says, listen, man, I got a couple of friends that work for the sheriff's department, and there's a guy who's a paper hanger who's really just terrorizing the city. He's cashing checks all over the place. So they don't really know how to catch him. Could you help him out? So yeah, sure. So he goes there and he talks to them and explains what's going on and kind of gives them tips and helps them kind of try and track the guy down and tells them what he's doing and what they need to look for. He ends up going into a bank a couple days later, a week later, and he notices that he cashes his check, and he notices that the teller doesn't really do anything. She doesn't verify this, she doesn't call this, she doesn't do anything. She just cashes the check. And he realizes, my God, I could come back here and just take all their money. So he goes to the branch manager and says, listen, this is who I am. This is what I've done. And he says, I'm kind of a famous criminal. He's kind of at that point, he's a semi-celebrity. He tells them who he is, and he's this guy that one of the things they were calling him was the great imposter, because he had pretended to be like a lawyer. He pretended to be a doctor. He actually passed the, I want to say the Louisiana bar. He studied for it 3 times and ended up passing it. So, never went to law school. So, he tells the manager, look, this is what she just did wrong. here's what I want to do. I'm gonna, if you close up the bank tomorrow a little bit early, or I'll come at 5 o'clock, let me give a 30-minute speech on check fraud. And if you believe that it's worth it, I want you to cut me a check for, I think he says like $200. If you think I haven't really taught you anything and you don't think I've helped out at all, don't pay me. No big deal. But if you do think it's worth it and you want to pay me, I'm asking you to call 2 other branch managers that you know of and recommend that I come teach the same class at their branch. Next day, he shows up, he gives a 30, 45-minute speech, goes over a bunch of check fraud, how it works. And he said as soon as he's done and he goes in the branch manager's office, the branch manager says, who do I make the check out to? And he calls 3 or 4 different branch managers and says, you've got to have this guy come do a speech or come do a little class. And so that kind of ended up sparking his career. Next thing you know, he's teaching classes at Quantico. He teaches classes for law enforcement. He ends up starting a secured document company, which creates secure documents for, he's done everything from like the Olympics to Super Bowls. So he's worked for almost every bank that's out there. And he's come up with some super interesting different types of secured documents. That's kind of how he ends up getting out of prison. He does all of his time. And what's funny about that is that I'm constantly being compared to Frank Abagnale. Because one of the things I did was, one of the ways I got 7 years off my time was I ended up writing a course for the federal government. One was a red flags rules course, which helps financial officers detect when someone's basically lying, how to check the documents, what to look out for. Second thing I did was I wrote an ethics and fraud course, which is used to help train mortgage brokers and loan officers throughout the United States. And basically, you have to take so many continuing education credits every year, and like 3 of them are on ethics and fraud, and I wrote one of the courses that's used. So that helped get me my sentence reduced. And so unlike Frank Abagnale, I actually got the government to reduce my sentence by cooperating, by writing courses and helping them, with education. The other thing I was going to mention that I think's interesting about the movie is that I really don't know of many people where the federal government's come to them while they're incarcerated and told them, we can take you out of prison. That's something that's really more Hollywood. I've actually only met one guy that the government came in and said, we will take you and put you in a house and let you buy drugs and set yourself up as a dope house, and we want to watch the house and have you deal with people, and as people come there, of course, we'll record who they are and that sort of thing, and we'll record the whole thing. But basically what had happened was somebody in the area was robbing drug dealers and murdering them. And so I think it was the DEA was trying to stop that from happening. And they basically said, we'll stick you in a house and we'll let you buy drugs, and eventually these guys should come and rob you because you're a known drug dealer. And he was like, do I get a gun? And they were like, no, you don't get a gun, but we'll be watching. He's like, well, so what happens if somebody pulls a fucking gun out and shoots me? They're like, well, we'll be watching. You'll be watching me get shot. So he was like, absolutely not. I'll do the next fucking 10 years. You're going to get me fucking killed. And then, of course, the other thing was he said they wouldn't guarantee that he was going to get his sentence reduced. So you're going to take me out, have me do this, possibly get killed, maybe maybe I'll end up helping you catch a murderer, and you're not even going to promise to let me out of prison after that. Well, no, we can't do that. He said, all right, get the fuck out of here. So anyway, he ended up doing the rest of his time. So it just very seldomly happens. But listen, it is an amazing movie. It's a great book. It's really a great comeback story. And I love an underdog story. Love it. Everybody loves a good underdog story. And listen, great movie. I'm sure everybody that watches this has already fucking seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, honestly, it's just, you should be ashamed of yourself. It's just embarrassing. So, look, here's what I'm doing. I need subscribers. I need you to smash the like button. I need you to subscribe. I need you to hit the bell. I need you to please, please share the video. And I have a great book of my own. Uh-oh, I hit the thing. It's called Shark in the Housing Pool, and it's on Amazon, and I'm going to put the link in the description. And I appreciate you watching the video, and bro, I'll see you next time.